Rich grew up on the next block, and maybe there was 8 houses between us. And so I knew Rich in school through activities and whatever, and then I probably never saw Rich for maybe about 52 years. And a couple of years ago at the Lusky in Palo, somebody said, yeah, well, Rich is right over there at the booth for the Range Historical Society. So we struck up a conversation, and Rich had told me about him digging into his Swedish roots and so forth, and I said, well, why don't you come to Swedish Cultural Society? And he came. He's become a member, and then I corralled him into coming and giving a program today and about Swedish roots and finding your ancestors, finding your roots in Sweden. And he agreed, and I think it's kind of a timely topic. I think there's a lot of people now that are interested in finding their roots. So I think you'll find it an interesting program. Take it away, Rich.
Okay, thank you. The first thing I want to know is how many people have gone into Family Search and looked up relatives? So we have a couple, more than that. How many people have gone into Ancestry? A few more. How many people have gone into MyHeritage? Okay. And the reason why I mention that is because when I started out, I was looking first in Family Search, because that's free. You register, it's a free membership. It's through the Church of Latter-day Saints. They own it. And if you put your family tree on there, the only people you're going to see is, if you put it in there, you'll see everybody. But if your neighbor wanted to check on living people, they can't see them because they're not there if you're living. So, like my mother who recently passed away, I haven't killed her off electronically, so you won't see her. My dad is there with no spouse, but I know I know they were married. So with respect to finding Swedish ancestors, come on. This was in the family Bible, and that's where I started from. So I knew that they had immigrated from Sweden in 1902, came from a village of Liden, and that's about the extent of what I knew. And the very first thing I did was to actually go to try to find the boat that they were on. But then I also realized that I have to honor these people, because if it wasn't through their determination to come to North America, I wouldn't be here. I'd be in Sweden somewhere. And they took a chance. They really did. My original family member that came over was Olaf Ostlund, and he came over by himself. And then the next year, I think he sent back money, and he brought his bride, or his brother brought his future wife over, and then another brother came the next year. And then about 4 or 5 years later is when my great grandparents came. And so, but finding the boat was not easy to do. I had to go to Ellis Island, and their website years ago, this is like about 10 years ago, was not very friendly. The other problem I had is I started looking up all this stuff after my dad passed away. So my grandfather, who was age 15, when he came to America, I knew him, I talked to him and whatnot, but he passed away when I was 15, and I never thought of asking him about Sweden, about coming over. There's a ton of questions I have for him if he was standing right here, right now. Never got that opportunity. I never talked to my dad about what he found out from his, because he knew his grandfather and his dad. Never asked him. So I'm starting out with a blank sheet of paper, and with respect to the manifest, and about 10 years ago, this sheet of paper, which came from Ellis Island, cost me $30 plus another $7 to ship it. And that's the only way you can get it. You can't copy it online. So some interesting things about this is, let's see, I can see it and you can't. Off to the right here, it talks about how much money they brought over. They brought over $100. They were even asked whether or not they were a polygamist. And I'm going, wow. I mean, it's amazing some of the categories, you know. There are two people who did not make the trip, and it's a widow and her child right there. There's a notation about being left on the pier. And if you slide across on the manifest, what you find out is that they had no living relatives in the United States. It's like, we don't want you. So it makes you wonder if people actually lied about having relatives so they could make it here. So in this document here, if you leave your parish to go move to another parish in Sweden or to leave the country, you'd had to have one of these, even to go from one parish to the other. And this one is the final one for my grandfather, Hugo Emanuel Söderberg, and he was born in October 1886 in Västernorrland and at Indosliden, and he was on his way to North America. You had to have one of these to leave the parish. And so everybody in the family had one, and luckily I managed to get this copy. That was actually, believe it or not, at the house when I grew up. Found it and hung on to it because it's a piece of history that I may never see again. So where did they actually leave from? Well, Liden is right there between Sundsvall and Östersund, and the farm name was Vastana, spelled with a W but pronounced Vastana. And there were also other members of the family. So I circled Holm, Helios, Brunfold, Ragunda. All those communities in that area around Liden were communities that my ancestors moved from farm to farm. And it's amazing how, what I understand is that you signed a yearly contract, usually in the fall, for 1 year. They were tenant farmers. They were very poor. And it was not uncommon to pack all your belongings and go from home to Liden, or, you know, from Ragunda, Brunfold to Ragunda. I mean, they just did that. It was not a problem for those people. So one day I asked my son, if I live in Virginia, Minnesota, and I asked him, would you take a job in Hibbing? He says, well, can I have the car? I said, no, you gotta walk. No. Which didn't surprise me. I'm okay with that. And if I went back to that ship's manifest, I don't know if you noticed, but My grandfather Hugo was 15, his sister Anna was 11, and Marta was age 3. And the boat name was Simric, which is like 2 football fields long and a football field wide. And it would handle up to 1,400 passengers, of which they traveled 3rd class, which means cattle in the boat were treated better than they. Mm-hmm. And it's really sad when you find that out. Mm-hmm. So, but if you're familiar with Sweden, west of Östersund is Trondheim, Norway, and that's the way they, I'm going to say, escaped out of... There's a map right behind you there. Yes, but I'm not sure where it is on. I think it's right about there. Is where Storlien is. So what did they leave behind? They left behind a pretty country. It was they lived on the river. This is from a postcard from 1920. And where did they end up? They ended up in Hull. Well, they came across Sweden, got on a boat in Trondheim, which is at that time was Trojan, and it was actually Norway in 1902 when they came was part of Sweden. So I tell my Norwegian friends if they immigrated from Norway before 1905, you're Swedish. Get over it. So they would come down to Hull, and at Hull, there was a huge port where they had a rail yard attached to a huge building that was a dining hall, and basically it was a port, huge port. So you would come into Hull, get off your boat, go into the dining room, eat, and the next train heading out to Liverpool is the one you got on. And it was a 3.5-hour ride across England to get, by train, to get onto your next boat. And these ticket agents had everything set up so you were constantly on the move. They did not want to pay for more than 1 meal, period. Ain't doing that. So they kept you moving, and I think when you got to Liverpool, you got on the next boat. If your boat wasn't there, it didn't matter. You got on the one that was there, and the one that was there took them from Liverpool to Boston. And they had a final destination with tickets all the way to Wadena, Minnesota. And I'm sure they traveled by train. That's why it'd be really interesting to talk to my grandfather about traveling across the United States. And I also noticed that in the ship's manifest that basically all the Scandinavians stuck together. And it was probably for safety more than anything else, because the other nationalities would probably pick on you. And safety in numbers. And I also know from reading historical accounts that the women and their children banded together on the boat for safety, because there were lecherous guys on board that would try to split out a gal and take advantage of her. And sad to say that happened. But they made it to Boston in August of 1902. And who actually came across? Well, got to go back one. Olaf was the father. Then you had Christina with her daughter. I believe that this is Anna and not Marta. And then this is later in life, but brother and sister Anna and my grandfather Hugo And he was a Hugo Sr., my dad is a Hugo Jr. So when he applied for naturalization, there's 3 steps to it. But the interesting thing here on this is, I emigrated from Storlien, Sweden. I'm going, no, you didn't. You came from Leiden. And I think what he misinterpreted is, what was the last city he was in Sweden? I think that's what he did. So I left Sweden at Storlien, crossed over, and that's okay. So they had paperwork to do even in Minnesota. Here you've got one where my grandfather, Hugo Emanuel, born in Sweden, he's age 31 at this time, lived here. He actually, he says 2 years, 10 months. Well, actually, he was in the United States longer than that, because this is a document from 1918. But he did remember that he came into Boston on August 18th, 1902. But at this time, he was even married. And his wife, Ida, Anna, she was a Hansen, and the Hansens were from Denmark. So I always thought I was half Swedish. I'm not. I'm an eighth Danish. And what surprised me on this document is that, to what country do you claim allegiance? And she said Sweden, and she was born in the United States. I don't know what she was thinking. Other than she was copying off of her husband's paperwork. So, why did they come to the United States? Well, they left because of Olaf Usland, and this is an actual snapshot of Arkivdigital, what it looks like from 1891. In 1891, this document, on this side it's everybody leaving, and on that side it's everybody coming into the parish in 1891. So a close-up of that gives you that where Olaf Usland from that farm was leaving the Sweden. And he came over by himself. Why? Probably because he heard that you could get land. Because of the Homestead Act of 1862, you can get 160 acres of land, but you have to live on it for 5 years, cultivate the land, and establish a residence. Then at the end of the 5 years, you go into the county office, you pay a registration fee, and the land is yours. You couldn't do that in Sweden in 1902. If you didn't own the land, you were not getting it. You're a tenant farmer for life. So I think that appealed to him. And I was always surprised at how much communication was going on between Sweden, maybe all these foreign countries, and the United States. Because on one of the documents I'm going to show you coming up from 1938, the only it was addressed to my grandfather, Hugo Söderberg, Wadena, Minnesota. That's all that was on there, USA. And he got it. And I'm thinking, wow, the postal department was pretty good back then. You do that now, you won't get it. So Olaf came in 1891. His brother Magnus right there, that's his brother, brought over his future bride, Anna Margrethe Augusta Haglund, and she dropped the Anna and the Margrethe and adopted the Augusta name when they got married. Looking at the Usland family, you've got Magnus was the father, Anna was the wife, born in 19, and this is how nice how you can read these documents. Born 1829, 1830, they got married in 1855. All these notations over here, they had to pass an annual competency test for their religion. And I know I actually read a document where off to the side when when Olaf Söderberg in Sweden, and I had to actually ask a Swedish researcher, what the heck does all this writing mean? He said, well, Olaf was tired of the Swedish church, and he basically said, leave me alone, I joined the Baptists. I can tell you, he was not a Baptist. But just to get rid of them. So, other information here, these are the family members. So you got Anna Britta, Jonas, Magnus, Olaf. Olaf was the first one. He was born in 1862. Magnus was the second one to come over in the 79. Jonas, he came the next year after Magnus, and he was born in 1870. And it goes on and on. It's just like, wow, this is really cool. Christina Elizabeth Uslin, who married Olaf, is right there. She was born in 1864. And so basically when the minister writes the records down and he's got to go to another book, all these get transcribed a second time. So when you're going through the church records, you're going to get a repeat of everything, which solidifies what you're finding out. That's what's really nice about Arkivdigital. So this is a death record for, looks like 1918. Anyway, the significance of it is, this is all in Arkivdigital. I'm going to show you a close-up because at the bottom on the left-hand side was Anna Uslin had passed away in 1918. And she was married to Magnus. And that is the farm name, because it's always important to know where the farm is, because that's where the records are kept. The first time I went into Arkivdigital, imagine a thick ledger book about an inch thick, 300 pages. Electronically, I went page by page looking for my family members, and I found them on like page 262. But I was willing to do that because once I found them, because I wasn't familiar enough with Arkivdigital to know I didn't need to do that. I already knew their birth dates. I could have gone right to their birth records, found the name of the farm, and then go from there. I didn't do it that way because I wasn't familiar enough with it. I bought into the package without taking a class. And there's the death record of Magnus Uslin from 1913. Once again, that's the year he was born, 1829, lived to 1913. I found that my Swedish ancestors were long-lived. Must be because of the hard work and fresh air. So, this record, I'm going to have to go to the close-up of it. I think it's a, okay. Olaf Johan Söderberg from Westfana, born in 1859, married Christina Elizabeth Uslin, and she's from that farm, and she was born in 1864. So that's actually in the marriage record side of Arkivdigital. The other thing I have to tell you about Arkivdigital is if a minister is right-handed, And you got to remember, he's using a quill and ink. And he's writing this way, no problem. If he's left-handed, he's dragging his sleeve across the wet ink, and I've seen messed up records because he was left-handed. That's just, you just have to deal with it. The reason why I asked earlier if you use Family Search and Ancestry is because in both of those, the Latter-day Saints Church has interpreters that actually have messed up the names. I mean, I think you can read these names. I mean, if you actually had the book in front of you, you can really read the names. They messed up a lot of them because they didn't read Swedish that well. And so like this one, it's Olaf, his wife Christina, Hugo was the oldest, then Anna. They had a daughter named Olivia that passed away. She only lived less than a little over a year, from 1893 to 1894. And then you had Marta Eugenia, the youngest. And quite often you would see where family members lived together. So his parents, Magnus and Sarah Britt, actually lived with them. And that you're going to see that quite a bit where you see other family members in the same residence. So I'm going to give you a close-up of this because it basically gives the family members again. But what's interesting about this one is, you see where they're crossed out? That's because they either died or they moved on. So in the church records, when they leave, they get crossed off. If they go to another parish, they're put in that ledger for the year that they moved in. If they left the country, there'll be a notation over here about that. But what really threw me off when I first saw this is there's a David Leonard. And I'm going, who in the hell is he? Because I was so used to Eric, Jonas, Magnus, Swedish type names. I asked a researcher about that. Where did David Leonard come from? I mean, is he adopted or what? No, that's their child. And what it is at the turn of the century, Christianity came to Sweden, and they started adopting Christian names to add more diverse names into the family. Who would have known? I didn't know that. So, here you also have Hugo with Christina Elizabeth Usland, and they eventually married. Or no, Hugo married, Olaf and Christina married, that's right. And they married, you can actually see the wedding dates. So David Leonard, he married a Marta Christina Lidstrom in 1889, November 16th. And Olaf and Christina got married in 1886, October 24th. And once again, it gives you the farm names. This is all great information for running around within Arkivdigital because the books are by years, by parish, by community, and by farm. And you really need to know the farm name if you're going in blind. And that's why I asked if anybody had been into MyHeritage. MyHeritage is the European version of my ancestry, and that's where I picked up a lot of the farm names because I didn't go into actually detailed research. You can find them out, but like if you go back into the birth records to get moving forward. But I got a lot of hints from MyHeritage on where the farms were, so then I could go back and verify it. And if you're in my family tree in Family Search, I've traced you multiple directions into my tree. I have another tree in My Heritage. I included everybody because I wanted all these clues as to where they may have come from. And here's a record for 1851, Magnus marrying Sarah Britta Ersdotter in 1851. Here's another record that I actually had to go to a researcher and ask, okay, you got Magnus, and his mother's name was Karen Ersdotter, so where's the father? And he says, see that right there? He was illegitimate. Okay. And I'm not going to hold that against him, but it was like, I didn't know. Magnus also went into the military service, and it was there that the Söderberg name came from, meaning he went into the military service and they asked him what his surname was. He didn't know what it was because he didn't have one. And they asked him, where are you from? Söderberg, meaning south of the mountain. And that's how that name got picked up. Come on. So when I talk about, you know, the flip side of this document, it's just addressed to Hugo Söderberg, Wadena, Minnesota, USA. That's all that's on it. It's got 2 Swedish stamps on it. And it came because this is Olaf's brother, Eric Jonas Söderberg, who died in 1938 at 76 years, 9 months, 27 days. And his family was still reaching out. And I was like, wow. So there was actually quite a bit of communication between the families, even when they had an ocean between them. So in Family Search, that's my dad, that's my mother. His father is Hugo Emanuel, who married Ida Anina Hansen. And if you go to Denmark, Hansen is spelled E-N. They changed it to O-N in the United States. And Karna became Karen, you know. So basically what she did, she was from that part of Sweden, and she left to follow her brother to the island of Bornholm in Denmark, and then found this guy, Jens Christian Hansen, and immigrated to the United States. When I tried to do Danish research, I found out that it seems like everybody on the island that was born in 1857 was named Jens Christian Hansen. So when they immigrated to the United States, they all immigrated at the same time. So it was, I need more help from Danish researchers to help me out. But you can see where Olaf and Christina are on there. And Christina in Sweden was spelled with a K and not a C. So you got to be aware of spelling mutations like that. The Magnus Söderberg family with Sarah Britta, they had a son named Eric, a daughter Ingrid. She actually went to, immigrated to England. And then Anna, Johanna, Olaf, Eric. I mean, rather large families too. So I need to go back. Okay, so I've gone back, you know, actually quite a ways, really. I've gone back into the 1700s, but only on the Swedish side. Now, for those of you who don't know, never seen Dale's dad, that's him. That's Dwayne. The reason why I put this photo in here is because you never know when you're going to run into another Swede. Block away, I didn't know he was Swedish. I didn't know he was Swedish. And this brings me to my next story. In 2016, I had this strong urge to go to Cotton, Minnesota. I don't know, on a whim. Like, Rich, you got to go to Cotton. So I go to Cotton, and I had my parents' Bible with me, and I'm walking around the cemetery where they're buried, and I find the tombstone. I go to leave, and a car pulls up. And inside are 5 people. 2 of them are Mobergs, 2 of them are Lorenzens, and the 5th one was a guy from Sweden. And I remember one of them, I think it was Moberg, gets out and he says, "Who are you and what are you doing here?" So I told him why I was there. And he hemmed and he hawed. He says, "You know, we're shirt-tail relatives by marriage." Okay. So I conversed with him a little bit, even the guy from Sweden. And I said, "You know, actually, I understand my records for my family are in Yalo, Sweden." And he looked at me and he says, "You know, we could be related too because my grandparents' records are in Yalo, and traveling in that area, they all did it." So he said, "We could be relatives." So the very next day, I was a trolley operator at Minnesota Discovery Center in Chisholm, and I went to work and did a special run for somebody. And then when I got off the trolley, I went into the admissions, and there's those same 5 people standing there. So I asked if I could give them a special run, and they went with me. But the significance of this story is Delbert Lorenzen gave me, he says, "I got to have your email address," because he gave me, he gave me that. The road I've traveled by Millie, which is Amelia Patzer Moberg, as told to. And Millie complained about her mother being a poor mother. Maybe she didn't realize her mother got married at age 15 to a 34-year-old German farmer, and she may have been forced into it. And so she was still a child, having children, living on a farm, and if you know what farms were like back then, the wife did all the heavy lifting. You carry the water into the house, you got all these jobs to do, and she's starting to have babies almost like day one. So it was a very hard life. But in this story, she talked about a lot of other things that occurred in her life, where she actually at one time lived with Olaf and Christina starting at about age 5. She also talked about how they had a neighbor, Nils August Saul, who lived in Cotton. He actually, believe it or not, knew my grandfather. Why? He came from Leiden. So he emigrated from Leiden, came to Cotton, Minnesota, and because he heard about some logging going on, he got a hold of, and he knew that Hugo Emanuel was in Wadena Bluffton area, so he must have written him a letter. And so about 1920, this is like 18 years after they emigrated to the United States, this Nils gets a hold of them, and my grandfather traveled about 200 miles to go see Nils. They were buds. And what happened is when he went back, well, he had a wife and a couple young kids. And so Olaf decided, well, I'm going to go check it out. And he went there and he purchased from a guy whose nickname was Click Clock a log home on Click Clock Lake. Later, Olaf renamed it Lily Lake, but really the DNR calls it Johnson Lake. So, this Millie who complained about her mother being a poor mother, believe it or not, got married at age 13, the day before she turned age 14, to a guy who was twice her age. Wow. So, when you talk about a Lucia event, cotton, this photo was taken around Christmas time, 1940. Cotton area was having a Lucia celebration. So Millie is right there with her husband, Martin Peterson. Marta, now goes by Martha, and her husband, Andrew Miller. That's a photo of my grandfather about the time that the farm was being built in Bluffton, Minnesota. That's a photo of my grandfather, Hugo, who, this guy on the right, I have like a 99% probability chance that this is Nils. And I think this photo was taken in cotton because I believe that is a Patzer. That would be like Amelia's brother. So that's my grandmother and daughter Anna. My grandfather loved to hunt, so he took two buddies from the Bluffton area. One lived in Minneapolis, the other one lived in Redwood Falls, and they went deer hunting in cotton, and that's what they did with their animals, just threw them over the top. Those are 1937 vehicles, by the way. One's a Chrysler, and the other one's a Oldsmobile. Yeah. Arthur Schwartz and Walter Johnson with my grandfather in 1940 with deer. My grandfather loved to fish. He also liked to make his own lures. So I have a collection of handmade lures as well as like an original Rapala, an original Daredevil. I have this stuff mounted in a shadow box at home because it was so unique. But he would make lures. Marta, here, in 1928, her husband Andrew took a Chevrolet and added an extension to it, and it became the school bus for 8 years. And that bus there would hold 20 kids. So they were definitely packed in there, plus probably needed to be packed in there because in the wintertime they provided heat for each other. But there's some of the parents and kids before they took off. This is an old photo of a get-together. So Millie was a child at that time. Anna was the mother. John Patzer those two are siblings. There's my grandfather, Hugo. There's Olaf. There's Christina. There's Martha. And I have no clue where this is taken. I'm going to speculate it was in cotton, but I don't know. But I really would like to have better definition of the harness that went on that horse because it's very decorative, you know, with all the tassels on it. That's Hugo with Gerda. She was the youngest of. So Hugo himself had 3 boys and a girl. And unfortunately, his wife passed away when my dad was the youngest, and his wife passed away when my dad was 3 years old. So my dad never knew his mother, and my grandfather never remarried. So, and there's Olaf with one of his grandsons, a Patzer. Olaf was killed, I believe, in 1938 by a car accident where a grandson was the driver. That's all I know about it. So one has to believe that a grandson made a mistake. This is the wedding photo of my grandfather, Hugo, his wife, Ida, Louis Hansen, her brother, and there's Marta, brother and sister there. There's my grandmother that I never ever met. That would be Ida, and Gerta. This is the earliest photo I've ever seen of my dad with his sister Gerda with him. And as expensive as photography was back then, they definitely invested in it, which is really neat. Now this is a photo of an Östlund in uniform in Sweden, and that's about all I can tell you about it. This guy here is also a relative, and he has a lot of similarities to my brother's son, Eric. So, and I need to know more about him. How I'm going to find that out, I don't know. And this is a photo that was taken 2 months before my parents got married. And they're at some lake, which is not uncommon because my dad was a fisherman and a hunter as well. And this is the last photo that was taken in Bluffton, Minnesota, when I was 3 years old, of us kids before my parents moved to Hoyt Lakes, Minnesota, where I was raised from age 3 to and on. So with that, I thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Do you recommend getting the archive program?
Do I? What do I?
Recommend getting that.
Okay, Archive Digital, you can try for free. Just go to the Arkivdigital-the. There's a free trial. I don't know how long it lasts. My membership runs about $200 a year. It's like 1,695 kroner, which is like $209, I think. And to me, it's worth every penny of it. If I stop paying that, Archive Digital has said that everything that I've done in Archive Digital is not lost. It's all going to stay there, and I can come back 10 years later and pick it up like I just left it the day before, is what they tell me. Any other?
English translations?
What's that?
Do they have any English translations?
There's English translation help under AI, but I think you have to type in every word and then it'll give you the translation. I find that you can actually do it on your computer or even on your phone by just do Google Translate, I think it's what? Translate-Google or something like that, and it'll do it for you. You can just type it all in. So there is help available there. I belong to the Swedish Genealogical Society, which is down in Mendota Heights, and that's where I've gotten the research help. And they have a Swedish day every Thursday where they'll actually have researchers come in and actually help you if you're in need of help. And they have computers, they've got a full library, everything. It's a nice place to go. I spent 3-4 days down there. You can also go to the Minnesota Historical Society. They have 2 libraries. One is the Gale Library. I think that's the one, if you go in it, they have computers available so you can look up birth records, death records, all these things, but you cannot have your camera or your phone out using it as a camera, and you can only have a pencil and paper. You can write all you want, but you can't have a pen. And copies of documents are very expensive because it doesn't pain you so much when you're paying $5 for that sheet of paper, but it's really, you're getting hit with a city tax, a county tax, a state tax. I mean, you're hitting with all these taxes and you're going, what the hell? Now we're almost up to the price of the paper. But they hit you hard. But I've got documents from there that I could not get anywhere else. My grandmother's obit, which from my parents was a really dirty copy off of whatever. I went and actually pulled the microfilm out for Wadena, Minnesota, found the obit in the paper and printed that one off. And I think that one cost me like $1.25, and it's worth every penny of it to me because now I have a clean copy of Ida's obit, which, you know, I had trouble reading because it was a lot of black. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm interested in the casual pictures. Guys would be wearing white shirts and ties. I mean, in the very formal wedding pictures, they were very dressed up, but a lot of the casual pictures, it looks like they got dressed up and they were wearing ties. Did that catch your eye?
Yes, it did. In fact, if you look at old photos, including weddings, and do they smile? Well, not really. They're very solemn looking. There's a reason for that. Their teeth are either missing or they're black. They don't want you to know that. The other thing is, if you look at old photos, you normally don't see the shoes. They have rugs or whatever. There's all sorts of photos where you don't see the feet. And I think it's because they have their ripped up boots on and they don't want you. They'll get finery clothes on as fine as they can get, but you're not going to see the shoes to know how poor they really were. Yes?
The other reason they don't smile is it was the exposure. It took a really long
Took
time
so
for
long.
exposure, so you just sat in one position.
That's probably true too, yeah. Any other? Yes?
Where did you get the photos?
What's that now?
Like, where did you get the photos?
Okay, the photos, my dad, he had them. Okay, after my dad passed away and I got into genealogy, I was at my mother's house explaining to her what I was doing, and she says, maybe you should have the photos. And I said, what photos? The photos that his oldest brother had. Vernon, my dad's oldest brother Vernon had these photos, and they were stuffed away in the closet, so I went and got them, and she says, you should have these. So I'm going through the photos trying to identify them, and some of them I can. Like when I mentioned Nils Saul, there's a photo of Alice Saul, his daughter, when she looks like about 20 years old, and that photo is, now why did my grandfather have her photo? Other than I think they're related somehow. That's why I need, not only are they buddies, but they could be related. So I need to find that out. Yes?
That young man gave me an idea. You know, you've got the photos not going to be photos. And we have John Byers here, he knows more about it than I do. What format do we preserve our digital photos with that are gonna last?
Not in JPEG. If you're, okay, when you go into a computer and whatnot, and you can make a copy of something, you want a TIFF file, which means all data is, and it takes a long time to load up a TIFF photo and then to shut it down because it's a lossless system. You're not losing any pixels, which is all those little dots that define it. If you open and close a JPEG, and you correct me if I'm wrong, 1,000 times, you're not going to have the same photo from day one to day two after closing it 1,000 times.
So, okay, the TIFF is the way to go, but what apparatus do you put it on a zip drive? Do you put it on a CD?
You're going to want to put it on more than one place. Seriously.
Do you want it to be able to have it physically, or do you want it to have to go look electronically?
Well,
Or do you want both?
I'm over 40, so I sure as hell don't want somebody else having control over it, you know what I mean?
See, what I thought,
All my family's old pictures, they just dumped them on me because I'm the only one that cares. And so I have physical ones, but I've taken pictures and sent them to my family that want to see.
yeah.
But that's, yeah, everything would have to be, you'd have to go in and have them made.
The family photos that I have, I really want to put them, I want to digitize them all, make them TIFFs, and then actually I want an external hard drive where I make one set of copies. Then I go to my oldest sister and say, Rosella, do you want a set of copies? Give me $100 and I'll put them on a hard drive and you've got your set. Then I can go to the next sister and say, do you want a set?
Well, when you say hard drive, define what you're actually, I mean,
You can buy an external hard drive that fits in your pocket.
and what variations are there on the hard drives, and are they gonna be around in the future? I mean, everything's changing so much.
Everything is changing, but they're all readable as time goes on.
Forget the password like I did on my hard drive.
So the other comment I want to make to people is when my oldest grandchild I have a son and a daughter, and they both have the same age, oldest grandchild. When they were 6 years old, I'm going, these kids will never know me. So I started an autobiography thinking it would only be like 5 or 6 pages long. It's over 70,000 words. That's over 100 pages. And I'm okay with that because if my grandkids ever read this, they're going to know me. They're going to, oh, gee, Rich did this and Rich did. I tell stories and I tell them about everything from grade school on up. I even talk about my girlfriends, which my wife is not happy about. But, you know, I mention everything. And I still add to it today. I'm an avid bicyclist, and quite often when I'm out bicycling, I'm going, ding. That's not in my story, and it might be from 20 years ago. So then I'll go home, jot a quick note down, and then when I have more time, then I'll write that narrative to add to my autobiography. And I seriously think everybody should do that. Your own kids may not want to read it. The other thing is you got to preface the story with memory has a slippery slope based on your perspective, etc. So with that in mind, when we were kids, I can remember we'd have a disagreement with another child, and my mother would come into discipline, and she got 2 different stories from an incident that just happened. It was complete. And how did the stories get different? Well, that's the slippery slope of memory based on your perspective, et cetera. It's all relevant in that. So when I wrote my story and told stories about my youth, I often wondered if my siblings, which are sitting right over there, would agree with me. Yeah, it happened that way. Or, no, that must be a made-up story. I don't know where you got that from. Yeah.
Shameless plug, if you don't want to write your history, I have professional audio recording,
That's another good thing, yeah.
and I've done it with 3 veterans, and it wasn't just about their service, but they got into it. I mean, the first guy did, I listened to it, these guys did about 4 or 5 years ago, but it's very reluctant, people are not tuned into that concept of passing it on. But I'm available if you want to do it, get a hold of me, Carl, Charlie. 20% discount for veterans, and if you're Swedish, I might even give you a discount too.
Yeah, it's worth it that way too, because then you get it in first-person voice.
It took me a year to find out it has to be FAT32 because that's compatible with Mac, and so the technology, maybe it's changed now. Who knows? So I have to keep up on it. So.
We can probably go on for about ever here. That's a heck of a story, a heck of a thing. So thank you very much, Rich.
You're welcome.